The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the promise of forever. For David, July 30th, 2025, wasn't just a date. It was the culmination of a dream he had meticulously built, brick by painstaking brick. He stood at the altar, his heart, a drum against his ribs, watching Sarah glide down the aisle. She was breathtaking in her ivory gown, a vision of ethereal beauty that made every struggle, every late-night coding session, every sacrifice, worth it. He had always been a man of logic, a software engineer who found comfort in algorithms and predictable outcomes. But Sarah was the beautiful anomaly in his perfectly structured life, a wild card he had embraced with open arms and an even more open heart. Their love story wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a steady, comforting burn. They had met at a tech conference, an unlikely place for love to blossom amidst lines of code and networking events. He was captivated by her sharp wit and infectious laugh, she by his quiet strength and unwavering kindness. They had built their relationship on mutual respect, shared dreams, and what David believed was an unshakable foundation of trust. He had poured his soul into their future, buying a beautiful house in the suburbs, planning their life together down to the smallest detail. He saw a future filled with laughter, children, and a quiet, enduring happiness. He saw Sarah as his partner, his confidant, his everything. The wedding ceremony was a blur of joyous faces, heartfelt vows, and the overwhelming sense of rightness. Their families, initially hesitant about their different backgrounds, had come to embrace their union. Sarah, with her captivating charm, had won over even David's reserved mother. As they exchanged rings, David felt a profound sense of peace. This was it. His life was complete. He looked into Sarah's eyes, seeing only love and devotion reflected back, or so he thought. The reception was a grand affair, a celebration of their love. The hall was adorned with fairy lights, the music was vibrant, and the dance floor was never empty. David, usually reserved, found himself laughing freely, dancing with Sarah, and basking in the glow of their shared happiness. Sarah, too, seemed radiant, her smile brighter than the chandeliers above. She moved gracefully among their guests, a perfect hostess, a perfect bride. He felt like the luckiest man alive. As the night wore on, a subtle shift began to occur. David, ever observant, noticed Sarah excusing herself more frequently, her phone clutched in her hand. He dismissed it as wedding jitters, perhaps a last-minute detail she was sorting out. He was too caught up in the euphoria of the moment to question it deeply. He was, after all, a man in love, blinded by the very emotion that was about to betray him. Around midnight, as the last guest began to trickle out, Sarah approached him, her eyes sparkling, a hint of nervous energy in her demeanor. "David, my love," she said, her voice a soft melody, "I just need to step out for a moment. There's a small issue with the caterers, a payment mix-up. I'll be right back." David, tired but content, nodded. "Of course, darling. Don't be long. Our night awaits." He smiled, a genuine, loving smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing beyond the threshold of their perfect wedding night. He watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing into the cool night air. He waited, a sense of anticipation building within him. He imagined their first night as husband and wife, the quiet intimacy, the shared dreams. He was ready for their new beginning. But Sarah didn't return, not immediately. A prickle of unease began to spread through David. It wasn't like her to be gone for so long, especially on their wedding night. He checked his watch, 10 minutes, then 15. His logical mind, usually so adept at problem-solving, started to race, searching for a rational explanation. Maybe the caterer's issue was more complicated than she let on. Maybe her phone had died. He tried to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. A cold knot began to form in his stomach. He decided to go look for her. As he stepped out of the reception hall, the cool night air hit him, a stark contrast to the warmth of the celebration inside. He scanned the parking lot, his eyes searching for her familiar figure. And then he saw it. Not Sarah alone, but Sarah, standing by a sleek, black car, talking to a man he didn't recognize. A man who was holding her hand, a man who was leaning in, his face dangerously close to hers. David's breath hitched. His logical mind screamed for an explanation, a rationalization. But his heart, a raw, exposed nerve, knew. He felt a primal surge of something he rarely experienced, pure, unadulterated dread. He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the gravel, drawn by an invisible, horrifying force. As he got nearer, he heard voices, hushed and intimate. And then, he heard a name that sent a jolt of ice through his veins. "Mark," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with a tenderness David had never heard before. "I can't believe you came." Mark. The name echoed in David's mind, a ghost from Sarah's past she had rarely spoken of, a past he had dismissed as irrelevant. He stopped dead in his tracks, hidden by the shadows of a large oak tree. He watched, frozen, as Mark pulled Sarah into a tight embrace, a kiss that was far too passionate for a casual acquaintance, let alone on her wedding night. The world tilted on its axis, the perfect day, the beautiful dream, shattered into a million irreparable pieces around him. The jasmine scent turned acrid, the distant music became a mocking echo. His wife, his Sarah, was in the arms of another man on their wedding night. The betrayal was a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. He felt a cold, burning rage begin to simmer beneath the surface, a rage he had never known he possessed. This wasn't just a mix-up with caterers. This was a nightmare, and it had just begun. David stood there, a silent witness to his own destruction. The embrace lasted what felt like an eternity, each second a searing brand on his soul. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah's face was flushed, her eyes shining with an emotion that was clearly not for him. Mark, a smirk playing on his lips, ran a hand through his dark hair, his gaze possessive as he looked at Sarah. David's mind, usually so sharp, struggled to process the scene. It was a betrayal so profound, so unexpected, that it defied all logic. He forced himself to breathe, to remain hidden. He needed to understand. He needed answers. He listened, his ears straining to catch every word, every nuance. Their conversation was a twisted dance of past affections and present desires, a narrative that slowly, painfully, began to unravel the carefully constructed facade of his marriage. "So, Mrs. David, married life suits you, I see, though I must say, you look even better in my arms," Mark said, his voice smooth and confident, with an undertone of arrogance. "Mark, don't, someone might see. It's our wedding night," Sarah replied, her voice a mix of nervousness and longing. "Exactly, and you chose to spend a part of it with me. Doesn't that tell you something, Sarah? Doesn't it tell you who you truly belong with?" Mark continued. David's blood ran cold. Belong with him, the audacity, the sheer arrogance of this man, and the heartbreaking complicity of his wife. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to storm out, to confront them, to unleash the fury that was building within him, but something held him back. A cold, calculating part of his mind, the engineer in him, urged caution. He needed information. He needed proof. He needed to understand the full extent of this deception. Their conversation continued, a painful revelation with every whispered word. He learned that Mark was Sarah's ex-boyfriend, a relationship she had always downplayed, describing it as a fleeting teenage romance. Now, he understood it was far more. They had been in contact for months, ever since David and Sarah had announced their engagement. Mark, apparently, had never truly let go of Sarah, and Sarah, it seemed, had never truly let go of him either. "I told you not to come. Mark, it's too risky." "David, he's a good man. He trusts me," Sarah said. "Trust? What's trust when there's no passion? Sarah, you and I, we have a history. A fire. He can't give you that. He can't give you the life you truly deserve," Mark responded. The life she truly deserved, The word stung. David had worked tirelessly to provide her with a life of comfort and security, a life she had always claimed to desire. Was it not enough? Was he not enough? A wave of self-doubt washed over him, quickly replaced by a renewed surge of anger. This wasn't about what he could or couldn't provide. This was about a fundamental breach of trust, a deliberate act of deception on the most sacred day of their lives. He heard them planning to meet again, a secret rendezvous in a secluded cafe. Mark was pushing for Sarah to leave David, to return to him. Sarah, though hesitant, wasn't outright refusing. She was torn, caught between the stability David offered and the volatile passion Mark represented. It was a cruel realization for David. He was merely a stepping stone, a means to an end for Sarah's ambitions. Finally, Mark got into his car and drove away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the parking lot, a conflicted expression on her face. David watched as she composed herself, smoothing her dress, adjusting her veil, erasing all traces of the illicit encounter. She took a deep breath, a practiced smile returning to her lips, and walked back into the reception hall as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just shattered his world into a million pieces. David remained in the shadows, his mind reeling. The perfect day had become a perfect lie. His wife, the woman he had just vowed to spend his life with, was a stranger. The pain was immense, a crushing weight on his chest, but beneath the pain, a cold resolve began to harden. He wouldn't let this stand. He wouldn't be a fool. He would play this game, but he would play it on his terms. He would uncover every lie, expose every deception, and make them both pay for their betrayal. The wedding night was over, but the real battle had just begun. The next morning, David woke up to the harsh reality of his new life. The sun streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating the wedding gifts piled in the corner, a cruel reminder of the vows that had been so easily broken. Sarah was still asleep beside him, her breathing soft and even. He looked at her, a stranger in his bed, and felt a profound sense of emptiness. The love he had felt for her, so vibrant just hours ago, had curdled into a bitter resentment. He got up quietly, his movements precise, almost robotic. He had a plan, a cold, calculated strategy to navigate this treacherous new terrain. He decided to act as if nothing had happened. He would play the role of the loving, unsuspecting husband. This would give him the time and space he needed to gather evidence, to understand the full scope of Sarah's deception. He knew he couldn't confront her immediately. Her charm, her manipulative nature, would only lead to denial and further lies. He needed irrefutable proof. Over breakfast, Sarah was unusually cheerful, chattering about their honeymoon plans, oblivious to the storm brewing in David's heart. He forced himself to smile, to nod, to engage in the charade. Every touch, every loving glance from her, felt like a fresh wound. He observed her, noticing the subtle changes in her behavior. She was more secretive with her phone, often taking calls in another room. She started going out more frequently, citing vague reasons like girls' nights out or shopping with friends. David, with his keen analytical mind, began to piece together the puzzle. His first step was to install discrete monitoring software on her phone and laptop. As a software engineer, this was child's play for him. He felt a pang of guilt, a violation of privacy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the searing pain of betrayal. He needed to know. He needed to confirm his worst fears. The data started to trickle in: text messages, call logs, location data. It painted a grim picture. Sarah and Mark were indeed meeting regularly, their conversations growing increasingly intimate. He discovered that Mark was not just an ex-boyfriend. He was a constant presence in Sarah's life, even during their engagement. Sarah had been secretly meeting him, confiding in him, and even accepting expensive gifts from him. The depth of her deception was staggering. David felt a cold, calculated anger replace the initial shock. He wasn't just betrayed, he was humiliated. He was a pawn in their twisted game. David meticulously documented everything. He created a hidden folder on his computer, filled with screenshots of their conversations, timestamps of their meetings, and even photos of them together, taken discreetly by a private investigator he had hired. He wanted to build an airtight case, not just for his own peace of mind, but for what he knew would eventually come, a confrontation, a reckoning. He wanted to ensure that when the truth finale exploded, there would be no room for denial, no escape for either of them. He also started observing Sarah's behavior more closely. He noticed how she would subtly compare him to Mark, how she would sometimes sigh wistfully after a phone call, how her eyes would dart around nervously when he asked about her day. He saw the lies in her eyes, the carefully constructed facade she presented to him. It was a performance, and he was the unwitting audience. But he was also the director, silently orchestrating the final act. One evening, Sarah announced she was going for a spa day with her friends. David, feigning indifference, wished her a good time. But as soon as she left, he activated the tracking device he had secretly placed in her car. He watched on his computer screen as her car drove not to the spa, but to a secluded cafe on the outskirts of the city, the same cafe he had overheard them planning to meet at on their wedding night. His heart pounded, a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. The trap was set. He drove to the cafe, parking a safe distance away. He watched as Sarah entered, her face alight with anticipation. A few minutes later, Mark arrived, his arrogant swagger unmistakable. David watched them through the cafe window, a silent observer to their illicit rendezvous. He saw them laugh, saw Mark hold Sarah's hand across the table, saw the way she leaned into his words, her eyes filled with an adoration she had never shown him. The pain was a dull ache now, replaced by a steely determination. He took photos, dozens of them, capturing every intimate gesture, every stolen glance. He even managed to record snippets of their conversation using a high-tech audio recorder. He heard Sarah complaining about David, about his boring life, about how she felt trapped. He heard Mark promising her a life of excitement, a life she truly deserved. The words were like daggers, each one twisting deeper into his heart. But he remained calm, his focus unwavering. He was gathering his weapons, preparing for war. He returned home before Sarah, erasing all traces of his surveillance. When she walked in, hours later, her face glowing, he greeted her with a warm smile, a kiss on her forehead. "Had a good day, darling?" he asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within him. Sarah, caught off guard by his apparent normalcy, mumbled a quick yes, wonderful, and hurried off to change. David watched her go, a chilling thought forming in his mind. She was a master of deception, but he was about to become a master of revelation. He spent the next few days refining his plan. He consulted with a divorce lawyer, discreetly, ensuring all his assets were protected. He even started looking for a new apartment, a place where he could rebuild his life, free from the shadow of her betrayal. He was preparing for the inevitable explosion, the moment when he would finally drop the bomb and watch their carefully constructed world crumble. He knew the social pressure would be immense. His family, her family, their friends. Everyone would have an opinion, but he was ready. He had the truth on his side, and he had the evidence to back it up. He wasn't just a betrayed husband, he was a man wronged, a man who would seek justice. The game of deception was nearing its end, and David was ready to play. His final, devastating move, the day of reckoning arrived, not with a bang, but with a carefully orchestrated whisper. David chose their weekly family dinner, a seemingly innocuous gathering, as the stage for his revelation. He had invited both his and Sarah's parents, along with a few close friends. The atmosphere was jovial, filled with laughter and easy conversation. Sarah, oblivious, was charming everyone, playing the role of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. David watched her, a cold detachment settling over him. This was her last performance. After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room, David cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. Sarah smiled, a hint of curiosity in her gaze. "I have an announcement to make," David began, his voice calm, steady, betraying none of the earthquake rumbling beneath his composure. "It's about Sarah and me." Sarah's smile widened, a blush creeping up her cheeks. She probably thought he was going to announce a pregnancy, or perhaps a surprise trip. She had no idea the abyss that was about to open beneath her feet. "As you all know, Sarah and I got married recently. It was a beautiful day, a day I thought marked the beginning of a wonderful life together. But unfortunately, some truths have come to light that make that future impossible." The atmosphere in the room shifted, the jovial mood replaced by a palpable tension. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face. She tried to interject, but David held up a hand, his gaze unwavering. "On our wedding night, while I was waiting for my wife, she was with another man. Her ex-boyfriend, Mark." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Sarah's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She stammered, trying to form words, but none came out. Her parents looked at her, then at David, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. David continued, his voice gaining strength with each revelation. "I have proof, not just from that night, but from months leading up to our wedding. Secret meetings, intimate conversations, gifts. Sarah has been in a relationship with Mark throughout our engagement and even after our marriage." He then projected the photos and videos he had meticulously collected onto the large screen in the living room. The images flashed, undeniable. Proof of Sarah's betrayal, the intimate moments in the cafe, the hand-holding, the stolen kisses. The room fell silent, save for the occasional choked sob from Sarah's mother. Sarah herself was trembling, her eyes darting from the screen to David, then to her parents, a desperate plea for help in her gaze. "David, no, this isn't, it's not what it looks like. He forced me, he threatened me." Sarah cried, her voice a desperate whisper. David scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. He then played the audio recordings, the snippets of conversation where Sarah willingly complained about him, where she eagerly discussed her future with Mark. The sound of her own voice, betraying her husband, filled the room, leaving no room for doubt, no space for denial. Forced? Threatened? Does this sound like a woman who is being forced? David paused, letting the damning evidence sink in. "I loved you, Sarah. I trusted you with everything. And you repaid that trust with lies and deceit. You used me, and you humiliated me." Sarah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her father, a stern man, stood up, his face etched with shame and anger. He looked at his daughter, then at David, a silent apology in his eyes. David's own parents, though heartbroken for their son, stood by him, their support a silent pillar of strength. The social pressure was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah's family was devastated, their reputation shattered. Their friends, who had celebrated their union thus days ago, now looked at Sarah with a mixture of pity and disgust. The carefully constructed image of the perfect couple, the perfect wedding, crumbled into dust. David then presented the divorce papers, already prepared by his lawyer. "I want a divorce," he stated, his voice firm, resolute, "and I want an annulment. This marriage was built on a foundation of lies, and it is null and void." Sarah pleaded, begged, tried to rationalize, but her words were hollow, devoid of any genuine remorse. She tried to shift the blame, to paint herself as a victim, but the evidence was too strong, the betrayal too blatant. David remained unmoved. His heart, once so full of love for her, was now a barren wasteland. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. With the overwhelming evidence David had presented, Sarah had no legal standing. The annulment was granted, effectively erasing the marriage as if it had never happened. Sarah was left with nothing but the shame of her actions and the shattered remnants of her reputation. Mark, too, faced consequences. The scandal affected his family's business, and he was forced to leave the city, his arrogance replaced by a bitter defeat. David, however, emerged from the wreckage not broken, but stronger. The initial pain slowly receded, replaced by a sense of liberation. He had faced the ultimate betrayal, and he had survived. He had stood up for himself, exposed the truth, and reclaimed his dignity. He moved into his new apartment, a fresh start, a clean slate. He reconnected with old friends, pursued new hobbies, and slowly, painstakingly, began to heal. The experience had taught him invaluable lessons about trust, about discernment, and about the true meaning of love. He learned that sometimes, the most painful endings lead to the most profound new beginnings. He realized that true happiness didn't come from a perfect facade, but from genuine connection and unwavering honesty. Months turned into a year. David was thriving. He had poured his energy into his work, achieving new heights in his career. He had also started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding solace and joy in the unconditional love of animals. He was at peace, his heart slowly opening to the possibility of love again, but this time with caution and wisdom. One sunny afternoon, while at the animal shelter, he met Emma. She was a veterinarian, kind-hearted, intelligent, and possessed a genuine warmth that drew him in. They started talking, sharing stories, and soon, a comfortable friendship blossomed. There was no pretense, no games, just honest conversation and shared laughter. David found himself drawn to her authenticity, her quiet strength, and her compassionate spirit. Their relationship developed slowly, organically. David was careful, taking his time, ensuring that the foundation was built on trust and transparency. Emma, understanding his past, was patient and supportive. She didn't rush him, didn't demand anything, simply allowed him to heal and to open up at his own pace. He found himself falling in love again, a different kind of love, this time mature, grounded, and deeply fulfilling. They eventually married, in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by close family and friends. There were no grand gestures, no extravagant displays, just a quiet promise of a shared future, built on honesty and mutual respect. David looked at Emma, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had found his true partner, a woman who valued integrity above all else. The story of David and Sarah became a cautionary tale, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that true character is revealed not in times of joy, but in moments of crisis. David's journey was a testament to resilience, to the power of truth, and to the unwavering belief that even after the darkest betrayals, a new beginning, a truly happy ending, is always possible. He had lost a wife, but he had gained his life back, and with it, a love that was real, honest, and truly his own.